I'm pleased to be joined today by Representative Norma Torres from California's 35th Congressional District and the only former 911 dispatcher in Congress. For over 15 years, the NG911 Institute has supported the efforts of Congress's Next Generation 911 Caucus to raise awareness on the importance of 911 and the critical need to modernize our nation's 911 infrastructure. We have been lucky to have bipartisan support and leadership of many congressional leaders along the way, and are fortunate that Congresswoman Torres has emerged as a leader of this effort. Since her start as a dispatcher, her local and state representation, and now as a member of Congress, ensuring the 911 system is responsive to the needs of her constituents has been a lifelong priority for Representative Torres. Thank you very much for joining us, and thanks for your support of the caucus and the Institute.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca, for being so involved in this issue that is important to all of us.
You're the only member of Congress that was a dispatcher at one time, so
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that and how you got involved.
Yes, so in my early career, I started working at LAPD as a 911 dispatcher, and it was through one of those calls that I received where a murder of an 11-year-old girl unfolded in my ears, and I was her only witness, to this horrible crime. But that experience is what threw me into a life of politics that taught me how to lobby, our local elected officials for resources that were desperately needed in my 911 center.
A little bit more about why the caucus is important to you.
The caucus is so important to me and to really our community as a whole, and every member on that caucus is committed to issues related to 911, and I'm so happy to be able to work with a group of members that are committed to this. 911 is changing, it's evolving. The next generation of 911, the act that I'm co-sponsored on, I think is a representation of the federal government involvement in insurance that 911 will be there for future generations, and that we continue to move forward in professionalizing the profession, giving them the resources, technical assistance, and money that they need in order to improve their technology.
As you noted, your bill that you've co-sponsored,
Mm-hmm.
and with recent efforts in the industry to improve things, what do you think Congress can do to help improve the world for not just dispatchers but 911 infrastructure?
Yeah, first of all, I think that we need to recognize they are first responders. When an emergency is called, whether it's a hurricane, a fire, an earthquake, they are part of that emergency personnel that gets called to duty. Days off are canceled, they're held over, all of that happens. So if we recognize the importance of having your telephone call answered and the coordination that goes behind the services that are deployed to an emergency, then you have to recognize that these are people that need the resources and that don't just need a title of telephone operator, because there's so much more than that. When we recognize and professionalize the profession, then we also recognize the need for training and ensure that our states and local jurisdictions have the funding available to recruit and retain their best personnel.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about the new technologies and the impact that that's going to have?
Currently, dispatchers have a lot of stress. Even the uniform companies, for example, it was very difficult for Los Angeles to hire a uniform company because you're either a zero or a really high number, because we are starving our way through stress or eating our way through stress, and no real way to deal with that. And that's just listening to crime unfolding in our ears. Imagine what will happen when visual pictures and video starts coming through. We're not prepared to deal with those crimes, to visually see something and not have closure, right? The detectives have closure. They know what happens. They know if a victim of a violent crime lives or dies. 911 dispatchers don't. When that line is disconnected, that is the end of what we know about what happened. So I think it's important to recognize that, and to recognize that while we want this technology to move forward, we also want to ensure that the human factor is considered and that proper training is addressed when it comes to feelings and emotions and dealing with stress.
I mean, funding and resources
Yes.
are always an issue. I want to give you the last word if you have anything else you'd like to add about the caucus or being a dispatcher or your current issues that you're addressing.
Yeah, I just want to encourage the community at large to, take a moment to visit a 911 center if they're able to. Oftentimes, communities have open houses. Do that and recognize if you do have an emergency and you end up calling 911, follow up and tell that department what a great job those dispatchers have done. We don't ever hear about them in a newspaper because they do a great job, and I think that that's important to continue to ensure that their morale is high and that they continue to love their job.
Yeah, I agree. I think we too often hear more about the negative stories just generally, and NG 911 Institute has really tried hard to highlight some of the many of the positives that come from these dispatchers. And so thank you very much for all of your support for the Institute. We're grateful, and thank you for your work in Congress.
Yes, and thank you for recognizing, my colleagues. I still consider them my colleagues, and I'm very proud to represent them here in Congress.
Absolutely, great. Thank you.
Thank you.